Few things in life is better for your happiness than a proper Durban bunny chow. A soft, hollow bread loaf generously filled with a classic Durban curry. Today we make the whole thing ourselves. The bread, the masala and the curry. All optional but extremely necessary. This starts in a stand mixer, if you have one. If not, no need to cry. A bowl, good old hands if you're lucky enough to have them, and 10 minutes of kneading will also work. Into the mixer goes 125 grams or 1 cup of bread flour, 6 grams or 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 3 grams or half a teaspoon of fine sea salt, and 2 grams or 2/3 of a teaspoon of instant yeast. Then in goes 90 milliliters or 6 tablespoons of lukewarm milk. Mix it all well for 5 minutes on medium speed. Once looking smooth, you add 10 grams or 2 teaspoons of softened butter and mix it for 5 more minutes until the dough is super smooth and elastic and you start slapping the bowl. In my view, bunny chow is South Africa's greatest street food. Invented by Durban's Indian community as a takeaway before takeaway even existed. And the trick to a great bunny chow lies in a step most people rush, as well as 2 outdated methods still used to this day, which we'll get to in a second. But for now, onto a bench goes your bread dough. Shape it into a tight little ball, then into a bowl of your choice. And then cover it with Greta wrap or a damp tea towel to not offend anyone. Let it proof in your oven with only the light on for about 1.5 hours until doubled in size. While that's doing its thing, we make the heart of our bunny a proper Durban masala, which brings us to outdated method number 1. Most recipes just tell you to use curry powder, that yellow tin from the supermarket, which is a mistake. And as you know, avoiding problems is easier than dealing with them later on, because ground spices start fading the day they are ground. And that little yellow tin has been sitting who knows where since who knows when. Whole spices, toasted and ground fresh, is the whole point of a Durban curry, or any other curry for that matter. And it's only a 10-minute jobby, about the same time as it takes for most great pleasures in life. Although you can still buy a proper Durban masala if no one's looking. 24 grams or 6 tablespoons of chili flakes or whole dried chilies, any kind as hot as you want. 12 grams or 2 tablespoons of coriander seeds, 12 grams or 2 tablespoons of cumin seeds, 4 grams or 1 tablespoon of fennel seeds, 2 grams or half a teaspoon of fenugreek seeds, also called methi at the Indian shop, 8 grams or 2 small pieces of cinnamon stick, 20 green cardamom pods, 10 whole cloves, and 5 grams or 1 tablespoon of black or white peppercorns. And finally 2.5 grams or 1 teaspoon of ground turmeric. Into a dry pan on medium heat, they all go apart from the turmeric. Toast everything together, moving it continuously until the seeds start to pop. The spices start to smoke ever so slightly and smell absolutely fantastic. Remove the pan from the heat, then straight into a spice blender or mortar and pestle. Grind it into a nice fine powder and lastly add in the ground turmeric. Set that aside for now or store it in an airtight container if you've lost interest. For the curry gravy, we need 900 grams or 2 pounds of boneless lamb shoulder or leg, cut into 4 cm or 1.5 inch bite-sized chunks. Traditionally, mutton is used. It takes longer to cook, but it has a more intense flavor. Goat also works mighty fine. Or chicken to make it vegan and save you a ton of time. Finally chop 400 grams or 3 medium onions. Then add some fresh chopped chili to that if you want the extra heat. 2 little bird's eye chilies are good for me. I slice them up nice and thin, seeds and all. The base of a good gravy always has a ginger and garlic paste, which you could buy, but of course, fresh is superior. Blend 50 grams or a good thumb-sized piece of peeled ginger with 25 grams or about 6 cloves of garlic, and a small splash of water, or better even oil, to help it blend easier. Blend it until it's completely smooth and then set it aside for now. Next, 400 grams or 3 medium-sized tomatoes. Get your granny's box greatest treatment on the small teeth. Cut them in half and grate them into a bowl, while the skin stays behind. Optionally, we also get rid of the seeds by pushing the pulp through a sieve. You can simply use tinned chopped tomatoes or skip the grating and sieve entirely if you're feeling a little bit lazy today. It's your life and your choice. Into a large pan goes 1 knob of ghee, which is clarified butter, but any oil, if you like, will do. Just don't tell anyone about it. 80 grams or about 5 tablespoons goes into the curry in total. Give the meat a good hard sear in batches until browned all over. Color is flavor. And here is outdated method number 2. Most traditional recipes never sear the meat, leaving 30% of flavor out there in the universe. So before you break your keyboard, as well as stone the messenger, just know this makes a better bunny chow. Take the meat out and set it aside for now. The rest of the ghee goes into the same pot, and don't even bother cleaning it because everything stuck to the bottom is pure flavor. In goes the onions and chili. Cook them for a minute, then add in the ginger and garlic paste. Cook it out until the raw smell has gone and the fat starts splitting out of the mix. The split is the step most people rush, and it means the base is frying instead of stewing. Be patient and give it its time. Next we go in with 5 tablespoons of Durban masala. Fry it in the fat for a minute, stirring the whole time. In goes the tomatoes, 9 grams or 1.5 teaspoons of fine salt, and 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of optional sugar, just for a little bit of balance, not sweetness. Add 2 sprigs of fresh curry leaves if you can find them. Dried also works fine like I have here, but the fresh ones are the best if you're lucky enough to find them. Cook it all for another 2 minutes so everything gets to know each other and force a friendship of unity. By now the whole neighborhood should smell pretty fantastic in my opinion, and the high-heeled blondie next door will be calling the Ghostbusters. All signs that you're on the right track. Back in goes the meat, along with 500 milliliters or 2 cups of light chicken or lamb stock, or hot water if you have neither. Cover your pan with a lid and turn the heat down to low. We need to simmer this for about 3 to 4 hours until the meat is pull-apart soft. Stir it every now and then, making sure it doesn't catch at the bottom, and add a touch of water if it needs to when it goes too thick or the water evaporates too much. I added about 500 milliliters or 2 cups worth throughout the process, but for you it might be different. Meanwhile, we peel 350 grams or 3 medium waxy potatoes and keep them in water so they don't go grey. While the curry does its thing, we get back to the bread. You should now be fully puffy, risen and doubled in size. Knock it back firmly, but gently. Place it onto your workbench, and there's no need for flour this time. Maybe a touch of oil if it's sticking, but it shouldn't be sticking at all. Roll it out to about 20 by 30 centimeters or 8 by 12 inches, then fold the sides in toward the center. Then roll it out again. Now roll it up into a tight little log, keeping it to about 10 centimeters wide so it fits the tin. Pinch the seam closed along the bottom. Butter your tin as well as the lid. This bakes in a 10 centimeter or 4-inch cube tin, which gives you a cute, perfect little square loaf. A link to the tin I used in the description. If you don't have a cube tin, you can simply make a round loaf or use a regular bread tin. Place the dough in, seam side down, and close the lid. Back into the oven with only the light on until the dough has almost touched the lid. It'll take about an hour and a half to get to that stage. Once proven, you remove it from the oven and then whack the same oven up to 190 degrees Celsius or 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the oven is up to temperature, you bake it for 20 minutes with the lid on, after which time it'll reveal a golden crust all over and a hollow sound on whichever side you choose to tap it. Cool it on a wire rack until completely chilled down, as you don't want to ruin your hard work by cutting a warm loaf. While the bread cools, chop the potatoes into bite-sized pieces, and into the curry they go. Cook until the potatoes and the meat are both fall apart soft. If the meat is not soft yet, then just give it a little bit longer. Mutton takes its time and it's worth the patience. Taste it and adjust the seasoning if needed, but honestly, you won't need it. My recipes are all measured to the gram for balance. And if you want, you can find 110 more recipes in my book for your easy enjoyment. Link in the description. Anyway, remove the curry from the heat and let it rest for 10 minutes or so. The wonderful news for organized people is that all of this can be made ahead, and the curry is obviously better the next day. The bread will happily stay good for 2 days wrapped airtight. So in theory, you can make this a little bit at a time, here and there, when you're in the mood. Then store it and put it together when the desire strikes. And when it does, cut the lid off the loaf, then hollow out the middle. Do not go too close to the sides, otherwise it will not hold the weight of the glory we're about to put inside of it. Keep the pieces you pull out to the side because we'll eat those first. Fill the bread up with curry until it's overflowing with generosity. A few optional but highly necessary fresh cilantro leaves over the top. That's dhania in Durban, coriander in the UK, and more commonly known as soap plant to us mere mortals. And a final sprinkling of Durban masala over the whole thing. On the side, if you want the full Durban spread, a quick sambal of grated carrot, onion, and a little chili. Traditionally, you eat this like a caveman, with squeaky clean hands if you're lucky enough to have them. But before you go do any of that, you go live a happy life.